of you. And even when I didn't know how to help myself, there was something in me that said, say yes to volunteering, whatever it is. Whoever asks you first, whether it's your church, whether it's a friend, whatever it is, say yes to it. That was my inner voice. I get back from Texas. I barely have a place to stay. I haven't really figured it out. I get a call from an old friend, Randy Novak, and he had started Shirts Across America. He was taking Jesuit classes or Jesuit schools and students down to New Orleans to rebuild homes from Hurricane Katrina. He didn't know anything about my divorce. He didn't know anything about Kyle. We hadn't been in touch for 5 years. He said, Leslie, I know I'm calling you out of the blue, but I need another mentor. I need a maternal figure. I'm taking down 15 kids from Bellarmine, and I need you to go to New Orleans and live in 102-degree humidity and live in a church and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and warm lemonade for 10 days while we build homes. Will you say yes? And I said yes. And I had no idea what I was getting into. But the most amazing things happened to me. I sat with these high school kids. I sat with Chris Gavin, the principal. I sat with these people in this community in New Orleans who had lost everything still from Hurricane Katrina. And I sat in a gospel church, a Catholic gospel church, and they were singing to me and praising the Lord, and they were so grateful for what they didn't have. And their joy was amazing. And that for me that was another God moment. So when I came back from 10 days, I came into the Tidesman and I was just on fire. So I guess I'm trying to illustrate that, because when you're hurting and when there's no purpose and you feel pain and you have no sense of where is your place in this world, do the next indicated step, which is help the person in front of you, because I truly believe that happiness, the greatest correlation and the greatest indicator, is a sense of gratitude. And we get gratitude by helping other people, because there's just no way you can help somebody else and not see the gratitude and not feel it yourself. You're doing it for them, but it's really helping yourself. So you start there, and then you start about getting honest about what you're doing and how you're taking care of yourself. Nutrition. Who are you surrounding yourself with? The 5 people in your life, are they life affirmers? Are they lifting you up? Are they sucking you dry? Are they a cancer? Are they victims? So you got to decide, you're going to be a victim or you're going to be a victor. And so you start identifying and you start educating yourself. And I read every self-help book there was. And I had every book on grief and all that. Yeah. But honestly, the component for every single one of them is get out of your own way and start helping, because you get really comfortable with that depression. Yeah. That's your blanket. You get I call it the struggle
bus.
Yeah. So
we like to be on the struggle bus.
Yeah. So let your strength become the struggle. Learn from the struggle and let it become your strength. And there's really good, there's good science on it, there's good psychology on it, there's good studies on it. That's what we're going to be incorporating with the post-traumatic growth. And it's really textbook, but we're called to be servants. We're called to serve God and serve others. If I've learned anything, that's all I know.
Using the textbooks to learn are people who want to be in that profession, not necessarily the people who
You know what? And some of the sickest people are trying to help sick people. Yeah. I think that was my first instinct too. In fact, now that you jog a memory in me, when I was trying to figure out, okay, Leslie, what are you going to do? I went up to a university and I was going to see if I could get a graduate degree in psychology. Yeah. And because I was reading so many of these books, and I said, okay, I've figured it out, haven't I? Okay, I can do this grief thing, I can do this loss thing, okay, maybe I can be, but I was going about it all wrong, because that I would have never learned what I've learned if I hadn't gotten back into the trenches. I needed to get my butt back into the trenches and helping people, because that's what brought me the greatest degree of satisfaction. You need to let your life speak. There's a great book. It's by Parker Palmer, It's very inexpensive. I highly recommend it. He's a great writer. Let your life speak. Look at those things in your life that have brought you joy and have brought you the greatest pain. And, you know, what's the common denominator? The joyful ones are probably where you've been helping someone, or you've been able to impact their life. And, what's the $1 million question? I guess everyone's got to figure that out. But I can pretty much spot when someone is really trying to move forward in a healthy way, and someone who really wants to stay back there in that victim mentality. And sadly, there's far too many of us. We live in a very narcissistic world, and we have a culture that almost celebrates victimhood. And so if you buy into that,
compete for the
who can be sadder, who can be the most pathetic. And General Mattis, who actually we put a great little speech of his at the end of our most recent video, because he talks about it and he says it really well. And our soldiers are not victims, but they come home and oftentimes they'll either play that role or people will play that role for them, and it becomes what's most expedient, most uncomfortable. We're not in the victim game. We're not giving free shit away, okay? We expect you, if you're going to be involved with a foundation organization, it's not free. You need to get in the game, and you need to do the work. If you do the work, you're going to get well, and you're going to help other people, and that's what we expect of you. So our expectations are high. Same with volunteers. We value our volunteers so much. There is something in what they're doing as they come alongside of us. They see that authenticity as well. We're not a perfect organization, but I think one thing you can say is that we're not that much different than we were when we started. We care deeply about our veterans. We care about their mental health and mental fitness, and we're trying to find strength-based solutions. And we still make mistakes, and we still limp along with the a small group of people. But I'd rather limp along doing really great things than, being slick and have all the answers. We're still asking the right questions, and we seem to be attracting a lot of amazing people. And so I say the more the merrier. Let's come on and do that. If you honor a soldier, you help all soldiers. If you get a soldier healthy, if you get a first responder healthy, their families are going to get healthy. Their children are going to see them healthy.
Does it get easier to hear the stories?
We need to hear more stories.
Okay.
I would say that no. I mean, I was reduced to tears just over the weekend. After we have our 2 events, we get a little bit of splash in the media, and we get some interviews, and we've got Cairo and King are sort of tracking me right now, and they want to come out and do a story, and so I want to be very thoughtful about that. I'm not just going to introduce them to any soldier. We're not looking for sensationalism here. We're not looking for pathetic stories. We're looking to lift up these families that are really doing the work. But that all said, I have had the greatest privilege of meeting people that have sought me out, knowing my own story, and have had to listen to them and walk alongside of their story. And it's amazing how it invokes in me still, and thank God it does, that I haven't gotten jaded, or that I haven't gotten hardened to my own sadness. And it's just like that. Most recently, so I had this beautiful story. Saudi McVeigh, she is a med tech in the Air Force. She has been serving the Air Force for 37 years. Her husband is a veteran. Her daughter is a retired Army officer who had to step down because of her trauma. She has another son that's in school, and then her son Bryce took his life in a Spanaway parking lot last year when she was in Afghanistan on deployment. And he'd been told by the VA that he was making his stuff up, and he shot himself in a Spanaway parking lot. This was September 4th of 2017. She'd run the race for a soldier a couple of years in 15 and 16 because she's a runner. And an incredible woman. I have so much respect for this woman. And she's active duty. She's basically a doctor in the sky, although she won't say that, but she commands this unit, and she's a medical technician, so they keep everybody alive in this hospital that's in the form of a C-130. And they travel all over the world. They prepare for disasters. They prepare for the worst of the worst. They're training all the time. She gets the call that Bryce had taken his life. They get her on a plane. She gets back. This is September of last year. It's the day of the prayer breakfast of last year. And she calls me out of the blue. She tried to contact me on Facebook, couldn't get through, and my social media said, Leslie, you need to call this woman. She's been trying to get a hold of you. Her son took his life. I said, okay. So I call her, and I'm getting ready for the prayer breakfast, and she's calling me at 5 o'clock in the morning wanting to know what she should wear for her son's funeral. And she told me the story, and Saudi and I have become friends. I made a pledge that morning to walk alongside of her this next year and help her find her voice and help her find her strength and her purpose and her bravery. Now, I think she's very brave because she kept working. I had to quit. But that all said, so a year later, I introduced her to Michael Reagan, who's the author and illustrator of the Fallen Heroes Project. He lives in Edmonds, and he has drawn portraits of fallen heroes, first responders, for ever since his Vietnam days. And he's a national treasure, and he lives in Edmonds. And he drew a portrait of Kyle. It sits in my place, at my apartment. I see it every day, every night. It is such a gift to me. I would have never had that done on my own. And it's about this big. I mean, it's beautiful. It commands a room. So I introduced him to Saudi, and I sent Bryce's pictures, and I said, Michael, I hate to ask you because I know you've done over 4,000 and you're doing them every day and it exhausts you, but would you do one for my friend Saudi? So I got permission from Saudi. We went there a couple of weeks ago to Edmonds, and he presented this portrait to her and spoke to her about being a Gold Star mom. Because Gold Star moms who have sons or daughters who have taken their lives as opposed to being killed in action, there is a stigma and there is a little bit of shame in us. Our sons served the same war, but the end result, the outcome was different. And so there's a less than noble feeling sometimes. It's not correct, it's not right, but it is what we feel. And there is a segment of the Gold Star movement, if you will, or the Gold Star organization, very small segment, but there is a segment that reminds us that their sons died in action and our sons took their lives. So Michael decided he was going to dispel that, and he did it in a way, and he brought in the Gold Star mom from the state of Washington and Idaho and the Pacific Northwest, and we were all there. I didn't see this coming, and Michael's speech to Saudi, and basically he was saying it to me too, was the most remarkable. I mean, I was practically saluting at the end, it's just like, oh my gosh, Michael, and what it did for Saudi and for me. And so she came to the race and she spoke before the 2,000 people there. And I asked her to, because I said, Saudi, you need to tell Bryce's story. You can make it whatever you want. I have confidence in you. You're a commander. You lead. Come on, you can do this. But she needed to, and she thanked me for it. And then Rose Minetz is from Michigan, lives in Ann Arbor. She heard about the Race for a Soldier after Stephen took his life 2 years ago. She looked online to see, my son just killed himself. He served, he was a Marine, he was a badass. Nobody cares about my son, everyone turned him away, and this is what happened. Somebody listened to me. So she gets online and she finds us. She calls me 2 years ago. She goes, Leslie, you don't know me. My name's Rose. And she tells the story. And I said, Rose, come be with us. We've got a race coming. And she goes, I'm going to. I said, you are? She goes, yes. So she stays at the Wesleyan Inn. She brings her 2 adult children that are just struggling. And last year she came. They ran for Stephen. This year she came. They brought more of their town. I put her in front of the 2,000 and she spoke too. And if you could read her emails to me of what this movement, of what we've started out here has just done for these 2 moms. So when you ask the question, does it get hard for you to hear the stories? And my first response is, I want more stories. I want more stories of moms and families who are shouting out loud that we've got an epidemic, and it's not just our soldiers, it's not just our first responders, it's in our communities, it's pervasive in our high schools, in our middle schools. And so I think we can all help each other, but we need to be, I don't know, proud is the right word, but we need to be empowered to tell these stories.
The stigma.
The stigma, and let's deal with it. And I know so many warriors who now have either had a gun in their mouth, and thank God someone pulled it out and they got the help. They're taking their victories and they're incorporating them into training mental health professionals as to what is trauma. Trauma doesn't discriminate. And we all have trauma in our lives, varying degrees, but trauma is trauma. And so, the brain gets stuck and we think it can't get fixed, but we know it's different. It is malleable. There are ways to rewire and retrain. And then, there's a medical community that just wants to medicate. So I think if we all talk about it more, if we love each other more, if we have great compassion for each other and don't just slip it under the rug or pretend it doesn't exist, I think that, we need to come together in all of our communities.
Do you think so, even with kids, youth?
Oh, it's just tragic to me that there is such a...
we don't talk about it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we don't
know what's right or wrong.
You know what? We don't want to believe it. When I first felt...
But I'm not sure not talking about it is helping anything.
I think it needs to be a more holistic way of speaking to our children. I've seen where in some school districts across the country they're incorporating yoga and meditation.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think there's a place for that. Since we've replaced God in the schools, and maybe that's another subject, but God, forbid that we even think that there's a moment of prayer for anyone, or a child that just needs to settle their heart down and maybe just send a prayer up or a meditation time or some some quiet time and in a meaningful way. I think that's helpful. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that we can bring real conversation and dialogue, and then real strength-based programs. Life is going to always throw stuff at you. We don't need to rescue our kids from bad things that happen. We've got to teach and coach them better how to deal with them. And we've got too many moms and dads that are just rescuing kids from the consequences of their actions. Now, trauma, a divorce, a death, some really tragic things like that, there needs to be counseling and help with that. But the good news is that you can overcome it, even at 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 12. But I don't know that it's being handled the right way. And, I'm not an expert. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a mental health professional. But God knows I've gone to tons of them. And I know what does work and what doesn't work. And I have a lot of respect for the warriors that I've met that are now working in the mental health field, and being able to apply some of their stuff. But I think as a community, I think it needs to be an intentional direction to helping our young people deal with trauma in their life and depression. I don't think social media helps, and I know there's some good that can come out of it, but I think the studies are coming out that there's far too much screen time. When I was growing up, of course I'm 66, so of course that probably feels very antiquated to most people, but we did our living and our learning and our teaching outside. And, we had TV, but there were 4 stations. And then even as my own kids and MTV came into it, I was very strict on screen time. We did. And I think if we don't, I think the consequences are going to be severe. And we're even having these conversations now with my 6-year-old and my 3-year-old, and there is some screen time, and I'm talking with my daughter about it. I said, so have you guys talked about, even though they're 3 and 6, they already know how to operate my phone just from watching me, That's sort of scary.
And some of them are on the screen all day at school too.
Exactly. So
they're not doing art or outside.
They're not doing outside. Their playtime is different. And while I think that obviously there's great genius in computers and that, I think we need to really be careful, and we need to pump on the brakes and see what kind of damage can be left to its own devices if parents don't pay more attention. And psychologists and teachers and all of that. And if I were a parent right now, I would be just as badass as I was when I was telling my kids that the reality world in that MTV has nothing to do with reality, and you're not going to watch it in my home. Because I didn't see anything good coming from most of what was happening out there, but they didn't like it, But, guess what? You don't have to like your parents right now.
No.
And your kids aren't supposed to love you necessarily right now. No. And if you think you're going to be their friend and please them all the time, then you're going to be in for a lot of heartache. So, that's me, grandma, mom now giving my unsolicited advice about parenting, but get them outdoors.
I know. That's what we were talking about before we walked in, is I just think we can all do a better job. Mm-hmm. We can all just do a better job.
Yeah.
With our own shit. Stop passing our crap on to our kids.
It's hard to, I know, I see so many moms sometimes that, with the high divorce rate, and it's 50-50 chance now, maybe it's even more than that. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of divorced parents. You have a lot of kids that are learning how to manage a lot of it on. So you have a lot of moms in the workforce and dads in the workforce. And so there's less time in front of them. So you do pass them off to, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm just saying this is the consequences of not being in their lives on as much because you have other responsibilities. And
I actually think we're going to go through a cycle.
Yeah.
And we're going to get back to the 50s.
Yeah, I think.
Where we're going to find that,
it's just not worth it.
Best for one person to take care of the kids.
Yeah.
We grew up where it was just my generation. It's all work. We're all going to work hard. We're going to get lots of stuff. And we're going to just high speed. And we'll just pay for everything. And then slowly you're like, maybe we want to be around our kids.
Yeah.
And then I think we're going to go another 10 years and we're going to realize that, it's actually best if somebody does take care of the kids.
There's
and it's
a consistent person. And how much stuff do you need? How much is enough, And
I think the more people go through hard stuff and life changes, where then you realize, our young people haven't been through a recession yet. Mm-mm. So
they're just
pretty soon when their cars and that mom and dad's houses are taken away from them, or there's death or real illness or sickness in the family, then that changes things.
Well, and you look at kids that are raised in just even east of the mountains. I'm not saying that they're all perfect kids over there, but compared to here where there's more agriculture and there's more responsibilities, where kids really have to, they're working on the farms or they're part of the industry that their parents are in. And maybe it's not a east and west thing, but I think the more you can incorporate your kids in just the livelihood of the home, there's a reason that certain cultures where the kids have chores and they're a part of the greater welfare, they value family, they value hard work, they value the elders in their homes. There's values that I think are starting to disappear that are absolutely critical to a health and well-being of us as individuals and as of families. I just think we need to, what's working in some of those cultures and what's missing here. And, there's just so much entitlement. There's so much entitlement, and that's not going to really serve you well, like you said, when you're out in the real world trying to pay that rent and trying to figure it out for your own. If you haven't been asked to do that prior to that, good luck on you.
Yeah.
If dad and mom have so much money that they don't make you suffer the consequences of the actions, I think there's going to be hell to pay down the road. But, one thing we talk about going outside, and that's something we've learned with our veterans, is that so many of them have found when they're dealing with trauma and death and just that hole in their heart, and they want to go off the grid, or they just want to go outside. It's been extremely beneficial. And I think we find that at our at-risk kids, marginalized kids, kids in the inner cities who don't get to go outside. They on these programs that take them outside, maybe for hikes or camping, or just it's a part of your regular routine.
Yeah.
And it forces families to talk to each other. It forces, camping is such a great idea. Put those phones away. Let's talk to each other. Let's open up a book. Let's get back to, next time you walk into a restaurant, it's tragic when you look at that each table where the families are.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their phone.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their phone. And I'm guilty of it, but I try not to be. I try when I'm with my family, unless I'm working, but if I'm with them, I put it in my purse. I put it in my glove compartment. I know we all rely on it for different things, but I think we need to take a step back. All the cyberbullying that's going on. I read something the other day of how many kids are keeping so many secrets from their parents on their, either on their phone or on their social media, and how they do it. They're really good at it. Because mom will say, "You're not going to do
they
that."
Were a toddler.
Yeah.
They have multiple accounts. It's
Yeah.
Not, I mean, yeah.
So how is that?
I tell parents when they talk, because we do a lot of stuff on social media. It's kind of from marketing. Yeah, marketing's my background, so that's, I do it. But you can't have your kid on something that you don't either are on or not familiar with. And that's what's happening, is that, like, my one daughter is now on Instagram, but I'm on Instagram and I'm in there and I know how to work it still better than she does so far.
Now you do,
Right now I do. But I couldn't have her on there if I had no idea what it was.
Well, and so many parents don't have your strength in that. I met recently the founder of the Guardian Group, and they're out of Bend, Oregon, and he's a veteran. He was a ranger, and a lot of special forces guys are on his team, and they're out of Bend, and they're trying to eradicate the sex trafficking and the human trafficking. And he said these predators are so good, they don't need to nab your child off the street. They're much better than that. They're getting through on the social media, and they're insidious. They're so good at what they do. And so not only are they, the Guardian Group and other groups like them, getting really in the education part of it, and going to the schools and going to churches and going to parents groups and saying, look, if you think that your daughter is only doing this, this, and this, I'm going to show you the back door here and how they're coming in. And people are in tears, like he was sharing with me. He says they had no idea. But if you're not savvy, and we're not, most of us aren't, I mean, it's real. It's a real threat. And so I think with young kids and the bullying and the depression and all of that, they're getting fed sort of a, it's getting fed to them through the social media. In a way that we keep our kids away from candy and poison, and we teach them to not go across the street unless looking both ways. We do all of those wonderful things to protect our children, but we're probably missing the biggest danger. And I know there's writings on it. I know there's more psychology coming up, but I think it's probably the we're reaching a critical mass where parents better really wake up.
You're right. All right. Well, Leslie, I kind of feel like you're just getting started. Do you feel like that?
I'm sorry.
Like in life, like this is a new life. No, I mean like in general.
Where
like,
you're at.
I get the feeling that like.
Well, I
you're
hope
just
so.
Getting
I mean,
started.
it is the last chapter of my life. It is the last season of my life, and I do feel like every chapter of your life, every season, we're always looking for purpose. And I do know that I feel very purposeful, and I just need to continue to get stronger and talented people alongside of me, because I can only do a few things well. And I need, in order to really make a difference here, is to continue to do that. So, yeah, I think the chapter ahead and what we're doing right now is really hopeful. Yeah.
Cool. So we finish, it seems kind of silly now, but actually I think it might be really interesting.
Yeah.
We finish every session with a question.
Oh boy.
And the question, no, this is going to be great. I'm actually really excited for this. Is that we ask every guest, what would you tell your 15-year-old self?
Oh, I love that question. That's a great question.
Especially for women. I found that it's been cool. Yeah.
You know what? I know what I would tell my 15-year-old self, I think. I've made poor decisions in the romance department. Somehow along the way, I got confused about what love is and what my love language is. And I think I had a great high school boyfriend. Great, just amazing. He was my savior. But after that, I made some really bad choices. I was always, a leader in my class. Mm-hmm. I made good grades. I didn't make great grades, but I always had a sense of leadership. My mom instilled that into me. But I lost my sense of self when I fell in love, when I gave myself to a man for the first time. So somewhere, if I can be frank, the sex and the soul of the woman, I got confused. And I think I gave too much of myself and my soul to the men in my life that I fell hard and I felt deeply in love with. To the point where I couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I lost myself in them to please them. And so I became an enabler and I became codependent. And that has happened probably every time with every love experience or relationship that I've had. And it's cost me a lot. So it's not you asked the question, that's what I'm going to say to my 15-year-old self, that I would have saved more of myself as I started to become a young woman and get involved intimately with men, because I allowed them to rob a part of my soul and I lost who I was. So that's what I would say. I'd say, wake up, girl. And I don't know what I would have done with, I don't know if I would have listened. It wasn't that I was ever promiscuous. That's not at all what I'm saying. Because I don't think that's ever a good thing. I think that robs women of the very essence of who they are. So I would have said, keep finding the same kind of boyfriends as your high school boyfriend. But I didn't, and it had brought me 4 wonderful children. So I'm not, you have to look back at every experience and see the lessons in the loss and evaluate them, and then see what was your contribution to that beautiful mess that ended that way. Mm-hmm. So take responsibility. But yeah, honestly, I think that's what I would have said to myself is go lightly into that. Yeah. Because it takes too much time to retrieve it. It's like,
be cautious.
Be cautious. Be more
gentle.
Be more cautious. Look at the red flags and believe those red flags. Yeah.
Trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
Yeah, I think we can all do.
Listen to that inner voice.
I try to tell my girls that. Like, trust your gut. Whatever that first thought was, it's true.
Because he was telling you who he was on that first date.
Huh.
And you didn't listen because you had enough love to change him. And guess what? You don't. You don't have enough love to change anybody. They have to change themselves. So yeah, that's my advice to Leslie at 15.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you. You've been really gracious. Really gracious.
Awesome.